We received a lot of questions from those who are on and some who weren't able to make it, related to the best practices for talking about mental health with students and colleagues, and seeking kind of an understanding of how to approach colleagues and students who may be struggling with mental health issues. So I'm going to again, in the interest of time, I want to try to cover as many questions as possible. This is a multiple choice question. You can choose which question you want to answer. Okay. One is, if a student or an employee, a colleague, doesn't recognize that they are having a mental health challenge, what is a faculty member or a supervisor's responsibility in trying to guide the individual to support services, ethically, what can and should be done? And then a second question, so again, you can choose, or if you can, do both. What are some of the ways to convey the importance of self-care to students? And for that matter, those who are professional staff and faculty at our institution. So a couple of big areas, kind of, what are the proper approaches, and in both, dealing with colleagues and students who appear to have mental health issues that need to be addressed, or, trying to guide students to self-care. Dolores, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So one of the things that comes to mind, and it's an area that we've worked on at UAlbany, and I know many others have too, is something that we call mental health training or gatekeeper training. That is that there are programs out there to train professionals, faculty on a number of things. First of all, noticing warning signs for mental health and substance use concerns. Secondly, knowing where resources are on and off our particular campuses. And thirdly, opportunities to learn how to speak with someone who may have a mental health or substance use concern. And primarily what we want to do when we reach out to someone with a mental health or substance use concern is to share with them that we are concerned about them and that we want to support them. It may also be helpful to actually walk over with a student, for example, to the counseling center, to the health center on the college campus. So there are actually, again, these training programs. I believe that it's still on the SUNY website, but there's a program similar to mental health first aid called Question, Persuade, Refer, QPR, that should be on the website, and it's free of charge, and it's an online training. So that may be a good place to start to learn some of these skills. But primarily what I want to leave you with is that what we want to do is express our concern and our support for our colleagues and students experiencing challenges.
Thanks very much. Saurav.
I just want to add a brief point there. Also, that this is a space where I think it's important to try to lead from the front, so to speak, and to role model kind of good self-care. I am very transparent with all of my trainees that I work with. I've even written about it. At least 4 times in my life, I have really benefited from working with a therapist. And that this idea that seeking help and support when you need it is not a sign of weakness, but in fact a sign of strength. But I think for those of us in this kind of teaching, kind of supporting, human service sort of roles, I think to lead with that. And I'm a psychiatrist, and we're generally taught not to disclose and these kinds of things. But if it's done with the intent of being helpful to, the person you're working with, it's okay. Not only is it okay, I think it's really helpful for students, for trainees, for young people to hear that people that they look up to, have actually benefited from that. They're saying it's okay, they've done it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Just in terms of the cultural dynamic, I'm in my 60s. I'll go that far in terms of divulging my age. But I grew up youngest in a family of first-generation immigrants, and I was nervous about telling my parents the first time I was going into therapy, and I was already in my 20s. And I have benefited from therapy a couple times in my life. And it is interesting that I have always shared that with my sons, and they have utilized therapy and treated it almost as, you know, I'm going for my annual physical, with that kind of regularity and as something that is necessary and helpful. But culturally, boy, you go back a few generations, and even now in certain cultural settings, it's going to be a challenge. John, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick point, because we've been talking a little bit, touching here and there on mental health literacy, what we call mental health literacy, and raising mental health literacy because of its practical implications, which is to give people tools and things they need to be able to better equipped to be able to recognize signs and symptoms, things like in themselves and others, especially when it's taught from a mental health standpoint, not just a mental illness standpoint. So the idea that we all have mental health, help break down that idea of us, them, that we're all in this together. But at the higher level, I think what happens when you raise everybody's mental health literacy is you begin to shift the climate and the culture around mental wellness on the campus. And that's why everybody needs to be in, faculty, staff, students. We're all in this together. We're all learning the same thing together. And I think we see that helps reduce stigma, and it leads to more help-seeking behavior. So couldn't agree more with what others have said.
Thanks, John. Christy.
I think one of the challenges too on campus is for both students and professors is everybody is busy. So you have professors that are going from one task to the next, and then there's a student that comes to their office and says, I need help, or a student that they see in class as looking, appearing as if they're struggling from a mental health standpoint. I think it's very difficult for some of the professors to press pause and say, okay, this is a priority. I need to take the time to talk with this student or help this student, because they're focused on the next task that they have to complete by no fault of their own. So it takes time to pause and to help people. And we have to remember that, especially with students, that self-care piece is important. And just one other quick comment. It just so happened that I happened to see yesterday a social media post by the Girl Scouts of Suffolk County, and they had a whole post about self-care for girls. And it applied to, all ages. And I was just so happy to see this. I thought, wow, that's great. They're putting it out there. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. They're putting this post out there. I don't know all the details of it, but we need more of that. We need more of that as the kids are growing up before they get to college.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Again, it's worked out really well. What you were just talking about, Christy, is actually serves as a great segue to a question we got from someone who was writing as a faculty member, and clearly is struggling with the issue of this is the way this individual expressed it. Are there best practices when it comes to balancing course requirements and student mental health? Are there any kind of policies or guidelines on campuses? Should there be? How do we approach those kind of situations? And I will say that for some of our members who I taught when I was teaching full time at an agriculture and technical campus, where our teaching load was 5 courses per semester with about 35 students in each class. To be able to discern what was happening in the lives of literally hundreds of students, while also doing all the teaching and all that, it's a huge challenge. So is there, as professionals in the field, is there, and I'm going to add to it another question we got, is there any recommended approaches in how to deal with that, especially as we deal with those students with now more so than ever marginalized identities and the struggles that they are going through? So I'm putting a lot on you there, but I think Christy, you kind of opened the doorway, and I really want us to be able to discuss that. So whoever would like to jump in, Dolores, go ahead.
Sure. If I had one wish regarding what I would want to see in terms of campuses advancing in the area of having open dialogue around mental health and sharing that with our students, is, I think, something that may be relatively simple, at least on an individual level, with regard to faculty. And that is to include a statement in a syllabus, in their course syllabus, to talk about the fact that sometimes college can be stressful. And here are some of the ways that stress can be demonstrated, you know, so anxiety, depression, that type of thing. And to let students know that there are resources on and off campus, and to actually put those in the syllabus, and even further, if the instructor is comfortable to say, you know, if you have any concerns regarding mental health, please reach out to me, and I'd be happy to facilitate a connection. So that would be my one wish. That's something that I do, and it has been effective in students actually identifying themselves and getting access to care.
Excellent. Thank you. Saurav.
I mostly teach medical students, residents and fellows. So, folks that are kind of moving specifically into a specific kind of professional track. But I find policies around these kinds of issues actually sometimes very constraining and challenging, because, kind of the mental health or, emotional experience of a particular trainee is often really, really unique. And I think actually what these kind of situations call for is to take into the human, particularities of an experience, and to try to come up with a compassionate and, professional sort of response. One frame and lens I do offer to folks, though, is that, again, in this context of training, young professionals, is that ultimately, though, you will be required to do this work where you'll be caring for other human beings. And, if you are struggling to the point where you can't do that well, that is part of professional kind of growth, even in someone that has, an emotional health challenge, to understand, hey, I need to step away for a moment. And I think that's one thing that we really can do, which is to destigmatize just being able to step away, right? As opposed to, so within medical school, it's really thought of as a big deal if someone needs to take a semester off or a year off to do other things. And that's on us. We need to work on that and sort of say, oh, great, you took a year off. What did you do? How did you get back on track? Oh, tell me about it. Tell me your story of your year, as opposed to, oh, it's a red flag and this kind of stuff. We need to actually say it's okay. But that's also, that's part of it. If you're going to be a professional, you do also need to be able to recognize or trust others that can help you recognize, okay, where we are right now, maybe this isn't the best space for us to continue on in this track of caring for other people or completing, all these demands of the specific educational program in this moment. Take a break, work on things, come right back.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely true, and necessary, but again, a cultural shift that's needed. Christy, go ahead.
I just had two thoughts. One, in relation to what Dolores was saying, there's always a way to bring it up. It doesn't matter what class it is, doesn't matter what you're teaching. There's always a way to bring it up. And I like that idea about the syllabus. I'm thinking about, I teach an undergraduate class called Issues in Healthcare. And it's related to exactly that, all the issues that we face in healthcare. And there's a segment on special populations. So I often will have a guest speaker come in. We talk about it. We talk about, globally speaking, what resources available, how people access services. Now that class lends itself to me teaching that. But in other classes where it might not, the professor might have to really think through, how do I bring this up? How do I make sure my students know these resources are available? But you can be creative. Like even in a physics class, this might sound very silly and I'm dating myself, but in a physics class, you could talk about the collective consciousness of the Borg, from Star Trek. Like you can find a way. And maybe there's, I remember when I was an undergraduate student, I took a 1-credit class in how to use the library. That was expected. This was before the internet was, fully functional. So maybe we have a 1-credit class as a mandatory core course for students to learn how to use the resources on campus, prevention and outreach, the student health centers, the psychological services, et cetera. Maybe we have students take that.
I think that would be excellent. I would double down on the Star Trek references by saying make it so. What I would like to move. I'm just going to check. Okay, the chat is blocking my. viewed. John, Lauren, you go ahead, Lauren. Yeah.
I can hold off on my comment. I was just going to say that I do think that I have been so surprised over and over again by sort of the literacy and like the mental health, the ability to speak about mental health that college students and younger are able to articulate in a way that we have a lot to learn from them, I think, in how they present their needs and desire. They're getting a lot better at that. And not to say that stigma does not exist and that it's not absolutely still a part of what we deal with, but I do think that this generation is also telling us over and over again what kind of resources and help they need, and so being responsive to that and really hearing them. We at the Kennedy Forum, we've done a lot more around making sure that we've got like youth advisory boards or young adult advisory boards or groups that really can speak for themselves and in those environments, so we're not just finding ourselves talking about this other group without them being at the table. And so I just want to flag that I think there's a really good opportunity to have representation from students themselves when talking about solutions for them.
Absolutely, yes. I'm watching the clock, and we've got to come to the final question, and for all of you, and I'm going to make it such that I think all of you will have something significant to say. Not that I'm putting pressure on you or anything. And that is, we're a union that represents faculty, professional staff, as you see from some of our panelists that work at our health sciences centers, our medical educators. We have physicians in our union. We have people who were serving in a COVID-only hospital at Downstate Medical throughout the depths of the worst days of COVID. We have faculty members. We have professional staff. We have those who care for cattle and horse herds at our agricultural. So we have an incredibly diverse membership. We did get a number of questions from members who were asking, what recommendations you would have for those who are in stressful conditions. There was one question about an individual who had dealt with a student who that's been in and of herself or himself or themselves had experienced trauma. How do you as a faculty member deal with that kind of stressful situation? I would add to that, if you want to talk about that, you can, or maybe tell us something about how you deal with stress in your life as a professional, as one who is dealing with a whole host of work-related and I'm sure other issues. What are your personal strategies for dealing with stress, both in your professional setting, but then also perhaps in your personal setting? So I'll leave it with that, and whoever wants to jump in first, please go ahead.
Well, first,
go ahead.
Fred, I found very helpful this construct called the 8 dimensions of wellness. Some might be familiar with it, but it's basically carves up, what's important to you in life into 8 sections. It's got intellectual, emotional, spiritual, social, financial. It's a way of sort of taking inventory on where you're at in all these different domains and where you're experiencing risk factors and protective factors. And take that construct and marry it with something like wellness recovery action plans, which is just a way of basically keeping track of yourself, what your stressors are, what your protective factors are, how to recognize the sequence of events that occur that lead you to an acute place maybe, and how to deconstruct that in such a fashion that you can build yourself a plan. It doesn't have to be the formal wellness recovery action plan proprietary thing. It can just be a matter of journaling and paying attention and just having a higher consciousness level of, and then using those 8 dimensions to say, where am I at financially? Where am I at socially? Maybe I need more socialization. Where am I at intellectually? Maybe I need a new challenge. Where am I at spiritually? And so I find that helpful. Those helpful guides from me.
Oh, great. Thanks very much, John. Christy.
Along the lines of what John was saying too, before I came to Stony Brook, I worked for a long time for a psychiatric hospital. And one of the things that they had us do was we created our own, what was referred to as at the time, it was our own little safety plan. And it was inside of our badge. And it was the 5 things that help us to calm ourselves, if you will, in a stressful situation. So I think back, this was probably, I think I wrote it probably when I was in my 20s. And I had take a walk, listen to music, pet an animal. You know, I forget, I remember those 3. I don't remember what the other 2 were, probably eat, because I love to eat. But those kinds of things, it was a reminder. Every staff member had it. And every staff member in that hospital was able to say, okay, you know, I need to breathe. I need to walk away. I need to do whatever it is that was there, what worked for them. And that ties to what John was saying, which I think is important. We all have to know what helps us. And, you know, granted, I don't have a dog in my office to pet when I really would love to pet my dog. I do have the ability to look at a picture of him, look at a video of him. I do have the ability to get up and walk around or do something that I know is going to help me to take a breath.
Thanks very much. Sarah.
I really appreciate these concepts, and I think sometimes you know, like the 8 dimension, that's a pretty well established, you know, kind of framework. I think those are really helpful sometimes. And often what you're looking for is the space where you're missing something, and that's where you can hone in and develop that. I like kind of, I'm a little bit of a big picture guy. I get sometimes my brain doesn't have the bandwidth to kind of think through all the different dimensions. So I appreciate kind of Viktor Frankl's kind of logotherapy approach. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and his kind of overarching question is, how does one derive meaning in the face of unavoidable suffering? Right, which is kind of, that's very dark. I mean, let's you know, keep into context, right? So Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, and none of what we're experiencing is anywhere near, you know, the realms of the suffering that he and others experienced. But that's a very important question, right? How does one derive meaning in the face of challenges that are in effect unavoidable? Right? Because all of us we're working on change, and we're working in our corners to make things better for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and all those things. And there's also just going to be a lot of challenges that are they're just going to be there. And I think, you know, there are many different answers to that question, but finding your answer to that question is incredibly important, right? So this idea that, you know, so within, you know, for my trainees, one of the things we often talk about is, can I work through something to the point where I can look back and say, I did not leave any stones left unturned. I treated other people with kindness and respect, and yet I still didn't necessarily get to the outcome I was hoping for. Can I find a way to derive meaning out of that? But that's a skill. That's something that requires effort and practice to do, but I think one that's useful for all of us.
Great. Thanks very much. Dolores.
I will be very brief. So when I experience stress, I often feel alone. And so what I do to address my stress is to form connection. So I go to people that I trust, and I talk with them, and I get support from them. And that's really helped me so.
Okay. Thanks very much. Lauren, go ahead.
Well, hard to go after everybody. I agree with her. I think everyone had really amazing things to say. I will just say in my own life, it's been, I've been trying to find things to ground myself, right? We all have, we deal with really meaty, important topics every day. Everyone on this call has a job that's very important, that is, you know, stressful, that takes things out of them. And I've really had to learn, I think, over time of what really fills my cup back up, and like really going out to just touch ground again, right? Like to actually sometimes just take myself outside and like sit there and be like, okay, this is sort of where I sit in the world, and this is one day out of it, and how lucky I am to be here, and not really to like ignore all the stressors of the world, but in the midst of that, sort of just taking a breath and all of that. And so, you know, I think it's also a learning process of, sometimes in life, you're going to need completely different things. Sometimes you'll need sleep will be the most important, you know, re-energizing factor that you have available to you. And other times, maybe if you have young kids, that's just not going to be a thing. And so figuring out what that looks like for everybody at your time of life, and really fighting for that for yourself, and really fighting for that space within you, I think is going to look different for everyone, but super valuable just to have that as top of mind.
Yeah, and many of you have hinted at this, and Lauren, you talked about literally touching the ground. So much research has been done in terms of the impact that being in the natural world has on mental health, and for that matter, physical health. And speaking for myself, that's an absolute necessity in my work life. The fact that it might be an hour-long commute to go home, but it is an absolute necessity to be in the hills, which is forested land. And yeah, it's a sanctuary. And I think that's important, which I'm not going to go off on a rant, but which is why issues of environmental justice are linked to issues of mental health parity for those in predominantly urban, poorer sectors of our society. Another issue that needs to be addressed. We have come to the end of our time. Two things that I want to do. First, and most importantly, I want to thank this incredible group of folks who have joined us as panelists. This hour has flown by. I wish literally, not that you have this much time in your hands, we had another couple hours to go. We have so many other questions that people submitted. We are going to have a second panel. I hope that we can bring some or all of you back for that. It is incredibly important for us as a union to work to make the society better, but also to help our members in any way we can in the work that we do. And that's why this panel was so important to me personally and to all of our staff who worked on this. And thanks to our staff, especially Christy Salmons and her work in putting this together. And so thank you, panelists, from the bottom of my heart for your time and your expertise. The second thing that I would like to do is those who are on, I would like to invite you to stay on to view a short video. We have a new member benefit that we are introducing. Again, thanks to our work with the Kennedy Forum, and it is called Psych Hub. It is a virtual telehealth type system or option. And this video will give you a brief introduction. And then as you see there on the screen, thanks Josh Sprague, another staff member who has been helpful, Amy Sheldon, another staff member who's been very helpful today. There will be a follow-up on May 30th. Okay, so with that, to those who joined us today, thank you very, very much. To all of you, I wish health and take care of yourselves, be well. And Josh, let's go to the video. Thanks.
We are on a mission to empower everyone to create a better approach to mental health for themselves and others.
The challenge for our nation is not only trying to get access to mental health and addiction care, but to get access to quality mental health and addiction care. I'm so excited that with Psych Hub, there is a future where we can improve not only the quality of care, but increase the access to care and to make sure that it's done in a timely way. Thank you all for all you've done to help Psych Hub in this process, and in turn, all you've done to advance mental health and addiction care for this country.
As you proceed in life, keep a big open heart, because mental health isn't just one thing. It takes patience, empathy, and really good training to truly understand what someone's going through. We've all heard the expression that we don't remember what people say as much as how they make us feel. You are all a key piece in helping in our current mental health crisis. Everyone deserves to feel they matter, that they deserve the best care, and that it's okay to not be okay. You are each saving and impacting lives by just having an open heart and being there for people at the critical moments that matter most.